The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it Wednesdays here at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, happy Thanksgiving Eve. You are probably huddling up. Maybe you're out the door already, taking a swith to get a little hydration going. Apparently tonight's the biggest drinking night in America.
It's got to be up there.
Statistically speaking.
Well, it's the unofficial holiday name, right? Never heard this one?
Blackout something?
Blackout Wednesday.
Yeah, yeah, I thought so. I thought that was uttered out of your mouth before in past Wednesday shows.
Yeah, it might be. Well, this is, I think, the only socially acceptable. Is there a socially acceptable time to black out on Wednesday? Probably not. This is the one that actually has a name, though. So.
Well, you are invited to put that off for 2 hours, or just join along. Put us on your flat screen or your tablet or whatever. Hail Varsity YouTube channel where you can watch the show. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. It's where you can watch as well. And hear us along the Hail Varsity Radio network. 489-1240. 489-1240. Number to get in, 800-825-5865. Mr. Husker Football, Mike Babcock, going to join us in about 15 minutes. Get Babber's take on Black Friday. A thought or two on Husker Hoops. They tip off at 5:30 against South Dakota. The Yotes coming to PBA. Nebraska favored by 22.5. So we'll get there in hour two. Evan Bland will join us from the Omaha World Herald. He'll be in Iowa City with us on Friday. And then Scott Dochterman does a lot of national work with The Athletic, one of their college football gurus. Also a longtime Iowa Hawkeye reporter and insider. So we'll get his take on Nebraska-Iowa at 5:25. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Isiah Pacheco back carrying the football on Friday for the Chiefs. How is he going to fare off of a busted ankle? Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. We've got a few listeners that'll meet us in Iowa City. Elijah, are you fired up for the road trip? I mean, we've done Colorado, we've done Ohio State, you did L.A. Now we're ending it here with Iowa City for the regular season with a bold discussion, depending where and when, to be had.
Yeah, my brother asked me, he's like, man, what are you and Schmidt going to talk about for 4.5 hours on the way to Iowa City on Thanksgiving? And I'm like, well, I'm locked in a room with him for 2 hours every single day anyway. I think we'll be all right.
Right, and that's the beauty, is you and I don't have to talk. I mean, we don't.
We could do a pod from the road.
Maybe. Or we could just let Junior drive and...
You could flip on a good podcast.
Or a good one.
Not us.
Yeah, not us. Yeah, I no. I mean, the thing is as much time as we've spent in the car together, it's not always, gun to our head, forced conversation. I kind of pick Elijah's brain on stock tips, and I keep reinforcing to him why marriage is over. I'm kidding. Absolutely kidding. Love you, dear.
The reason I'm single.
Yeah.
All these road trips.
You look at this grumpy mid-40s loser that stumbles in every day. Man, no, she's awesome. The bunny's pretty good stuff. She made an appearance, or was supposed to, last night on the Average Joe podcast. The show started too late because we just missed footage of her putting ornaments on the tree, and then the three dogs trying to take said ornaments off the tree and her losing her mind on them. So we'll dive in. A word we're getting on the Chasing 3 that will either drop tonight or tomorrow morning is some Dana Holgerson instruction, some footage that may appear when it comes to practice and Nebraska practicing finishing and some words of encouragement from Dana in that aspect. A lot going on, a lot on the line for Nebraska and Iowa. Really, Tampa, right? The winner likely ends up in Tampa, the old Outback Bowl, and that's big. ReliaQuest is the new name of it, but if you can end this season with all sorts of momentum, and think about next week. You go play well and get a win if you're Nebraska in Iowa City. Doesn't happen all that often in November against Iowa. Doesn't happen really ever at night. I think the last team to get out alive of Kinnick at night was probably Penn State during the Saquon Barkley era. You got to go back to 2019 for that. So it'd be a remarkable way to end the season. But right now, as you look at this ball game, Iowa and Nebraska here, the care level, I think it's still pretty high. I mean, I'm not asking care level for the team. I think the team's going to go out and play well, and I think the team's going to go out and play better than maybe you've seen them, just because that they know that they're going bowling. And with that part of things, it's a different pressure. It's the internal pressure to go out, play well, because you want to beat Iowa. You want to beat a rival. You want to beat a border rival. You want to, maybe finish tied for 6th in the Big Ten standings. There's all those things that are attached to another win. It's win 7. But the pressure is just in the moment versus bigger picture pressure. And that's the thing that this Nebraska team's kind of had on their back all along. When we talk about this drought, the importance of getting the Wisconsin win, the way they got the Wisconsin win, and now you can kind of roll that forward. You're coming in relatively healthy. You're coming in with an offense that continues to find its groove and isn't a liability. You're coming in with special teams, Elijah, that is something that can maybe be equal, not to jinx things, but you've been punting and kicking well. Hell, you even got a kickoff return for 50 yards to start your first drive. So now it really kind of comes down to the defense and tackling against a wounded passing attack, but a really talented top 3 running back that'll be picked in this year's draft.
Yeah, and the question is if Nebraska does in fact load up the box how we expect, which, to be fair, a lot of teams have loaded up the box against Iowa this year and not had great success. Though I think Nebraska's got some difference makers in Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker. And let's not forget Riley Van Poppel, who's probably going to get his 4th game on Friday as well. They have some difference makers in the middle there. And whenever Nebraska has expected run this year, and I'm not just talking in games as a whole, but there's situational moments in games as well. Nebraska's done really, really well on 3rd and short and 4th and short whenever they're expecting the run.
12 out of 15. They have turned people away on 4th and short.
That's what I'm saying. Nebraska, when they expect the run, when they can load up the box, when those linebackers can play downhill, they've done really, really well. If they load up the box, can Iowa turn around and beat you with play action? Maybe get that one deep shot that keep your safeties from keeping their eyes in the backfield, from keeping those linebackers from flowing downhill. That's kind of the question mark to me. But I think stylistically the game, with what Iowa brings offensively, matches up well for Nebraska's defense whenever you understand, this Iowa team's probably going to be pretty one-dimensional. And especially given the weather forecast on Friday, they're probably going to run the ball 50-plus times, if I had to guess. Like, looking from the outside, looking in, maybe Iowa will surprise me. That's not typically what Iowa does offensively, though. It's not usually we're going to come out and surprise you type offense. They're going to be physical. They're going to be downhill. They're going to try to run the ball down your throat, and it's a mano-y-mano battle. Iowa's front 6/7, because they play so many 2 tight end fronts, against Nebraska's front 7. Who can go out there and win those one-on-one battles? That's the question. And the mystery is kind of how Nebraska responds this week to success and to a rivalry game on Friday, because when emotions are running high in a rivalry game, sometimes you have to throw what you know about a team out just a little bit. Emotions and playing off those emotions can change things. I mean, look how different Nebraska played against Colorado compared to some other early season opponents, because the emotions are running high. It's a rivalry game. You have the home crowd behind you. Like, this is not just Nebraska. It's Iowa as well. Who can respond to those emotions, who can play through those emotions, and who can play their best football because of those emotions is another factor with this game on Friday.
You can play at an absolutely another level. And what you are going to walk into is a blackout, keeping it with the Blackout Wednesday theme. You're going to walk into a blackout at Kinnick. They're going to be cranked up. It's a crowd that isn't, waking and baking, so to speak, for an 11 a.m. freeze-your-butt-off type kickoff, although it was very, very nice 2 years ago in Iowa City. It's beautiful weather, great weather to throw the football to Trey Palmer. You're going to have a day to recover from how many pounds you put on Thanksgiving Day. Gear up, get to your tailgate, pour a drink, fire up a burger, and then meander your way to Kinnick. So the crowd should be all sorts of nuts, and that'll be fun to go into and try and silence if you're Nebraska. But imagine what you had for Colorado as a Nebraska fan. I think it's going to be, I don't know if it will equal what Nebraska had, but I think it's going to be a similar type toxic environment going into that setup on a Friday night.
Well, we'll see how juiced up the Iowa crowd is. This is a small sample size, but I talked to a friend of mine. He went to the University of Iowa, big Iowa fan. We'll call him Nick. And I messaged Nick because I know he's in the Iowa City area right now for Thanksgiving. I said, hey, you go into the game on Friday? He goes, well, I have a ticket, but I'm looking at the weather forecast.
So some of them might just pass.
Look, he said, I'm looking at the weather forecast, and I'm looking at Iowa's offense, and I'm trying to figure out if it's worth it. So that's a small sample size. That's just one guy who, to be fair, lives further down south now than Iowa. So he is not accustomed to the Midwest weather anymore. So he might be a unique example. But that is a real factor for fans is, man, do you want to go sit out in this 10-degree true feel weather to go watch Iowa's offense battle it out with Nebraska in a season for Iowa that – what are they fighting for at the end of the year? A win against your rival, yes, but you're not fighting for a playoff berth.
It's not a Big Ten championship berth. It's, do we go to Tampa? It's a 7-win. And let's be honest. You talk to Iowa fans and kind of the buzz. I mean, they're not happy that they lost to Michigan State this year. They're not happy that they went out and lost to UCLA. 7-win Iowa team. You won 7 games with biscuits and gravy playing quarterback last year.
With Brian Ferentz as your OC.
I know. I mean, and you're stuck there. Your defense, not quite as good, but still top 13 in the country, so I have tons of respect for it. But it was supposed to be a better year for you because you had McNamara. He fizzled out. But you found Sullivan, who's really good. His ankle's jacked. And now you got Eric Stratton, damn glad to meet you, taking snaps. But you have an incredible running game. You have that back. You have that defense. So
you have 10 guys on offense that want to get out there and block for the 11th guy from a running game point of view. I mean, they want to physically attack you. It's what they do, and it's what they've done for a long, long time.
The care level, I'm kind of flipping it towards Nebraska fan, but that's a fair question for Iowa fan. How crazy or heated will the environment be? I expect it to be nuts. Like just crazy, loud. It's Nebraska. They don't like Nebraska. Nebraska doesn't like them. And, Iowa's streak got snapped against Nebraska, but they still have reeled off quite a few consecutive wins, and a lot of them in bludgeoning fashion. You've got 2014 and you have 2022. That's it. Otherwise, Iowa's pretty much done whatever they wanted, either in blowout fashion during the Noah Fant era, or they've kicked they found a way to win with the anemic offenses in Lincoln a couple of times with kickoffs and walk-off wins, and their incentive, too, has been to keep Nebraska from bowling. Well, they've done that a couple of times. That's not the case this year. Let's get some starting 5 shout-outs. Get in the stream if you like. Hail Varsity YouTube channels where you go. Like and subscribe there. Arlo is in. Arlo, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks much. Mr. Erickson is here. Cliff in from Florida. It's not 37 degrees in Florida where it is here. Captain says things going on. Justin is here. Great Red Shark checks in. Grateful Red is here. Says happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Let's get Black Shirt Friday started. Ronnie is here. It's all right, man. Ronnie, you missed the top 5, but you're still all good. I love Kevin, man. Kevin listening from Cabo San Lucas Says that Pacifico beer is cold, poolside, 79 degrees. The Snitley boys, we are going to pour a whiskey for them and with them in Kinnick. Jeff and Brian Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Tuck is here, aggressively average. Says, I said it once, I'll say it again. The trees in Nebraska lean to the east because Iowa sucks. And the wind blows from Colorado. There we have it. Jay is in. JB is my dad is here. The other Dave checks in. Brent says the greatest thing about eating Hawkeyes is they're easy to chew up. There we have it. Mike checks in. Good to have you. 3-putt back at it. Walter and Philly in all caps, screaming, presumably, stop the run. Stop the run. I'm sure Coach White has said that a lot in this short week. Scott is here, says, hi all, happy Thanksgiving. Mike in from Cali. Good to have Mike checking in. Nate says, what's up? Says, Elijah won't get a flat tire on this road trip. No, he won't. Let's just speak that into existence.
But knock on wood, if we do pop a flat tire, you better believe Schmidt's going to make me go change that thing on the side of the interstate.
I am calling AAA.
Why would you do that whenever you got me?
Why? Because I won't ask you to do that. It's cold out there. Mike Babcock going to be with us. We'll get ready for Nebraska-Iowa. It's Hail Varsity with you on a Wednesday.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Wednesday edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Hope your Thanksgiving plans are awesome. Be sure to catch us 3 to 5 from the Marriott across from Kinnick on Hail Varsity YouTube. Pre-game show 3 to 5. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Mike Babcock with us here, Mr. Husker football, to talk some Nebraska-Iowa, little Husker hoops as well. Babbers, I might text you and get a hope and pray for a text response back. You're always great doing that. But if I were to put a Grateful Dead playlist together, I've got some of mine in my phone, but I can send you what I have. But I would like some suggestions, Babbers, just to enlighten the road trip. I'm driving, so I'm playing the music. I get to pick the music, and I think we should put a Babbers playlist together of the Dead. How's that sound?
Oh, that sounds good.
You want to roll with?
Yeah.
It'd be all right.
Stuff I got to do otherwise.
No, I know. I know. Nebraska's got stuff to do in Black Friday, like, I don't know, get a 7th win. How do you feel about this setup here, this showdown on Friday?
Well, it's I think of what Will Bolt tells the baseball team: gritty beats pretty. Mm-hmm. This is going to be one of those kind of games. I think it's going to be a gritty effort. It's going to take a gritty effort to win this game. You mentioned Iowa's running game. Caleb Johnson is an outstanding running back. Iowa averages about 213 rushing yards a game. And teams have known what Iowa is going to do, and it still gets the job done with Caleb Johnson. So, and the other thing is that Iowa seems to like these games that go into the second half undecided, because I think almost 70% of Iowa's points have come in the second half.
Man.
And the third thing I would say is Iowa is plus 11 on turnovers. That to me says it all. You better be ready for a fight, and I think Nebraska has the players to do it. But as Elijah said earlier, let's see how Nebraska responds to a victory, to success. You got the bowl game, but you want more than that, presumably. You want that 7th win. And are you prepared to go out and do that?
It's Mike Babcock with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, whenever you talk about the emotions, handling that success, one of the things you have to evaluate here is this is technically a rivalry game. Well, I want to get your thoughts on just the rivalry as a whole with Iowa. Or does it reach the point of rivalry for you? Because I think you have kind of the border battle element. Husker fans have to deal with Iowa fans plenty in their day-to-day lives and vice versa. Is this a rivalry in your eyes? I know it's no Nebraska-Oklahoma, at least not yet, but do you see this as a rivalry game where emotions are going to be running high?
Yeah, I think it's moving in that direction. Obviously, when you think of Nebraska and rivalries, you think of Oklahoma first. You probably think of Colorado second, and then I'm putting Iowa in the third position. But you don't play Colorado every year now. You do play Iowa, and you play it on Black Friday. I think it's moving in that direction. I think it's a legitimate. If you look at the schedule of the 12 games, this is probably the one that I would designate as a significant rival. And I think that whether there's a hero's trophy or not, that's not the necessary thing to make it that. It's just a kind of an add-on sort of thing. But I think there's rivalry elements of this game, definitely.
Mike Babcock is with us, Nebraska-Iowa. Mike, we know that Caleb Johnson, if he's held under 100, Iowa's 0-3. They're 7-1 with him going over the century mark. I want to flip it around. What's Emmett Johnson? What's Dowdell? What's Harburg? What's Nebraska got to do on the ground? I ask that because I think throwing the football is going to be at a premium Friday night just because of the conditions.
Yeah, well, you got Emmett Johnson got over 100 yards against Wisconsin. That's the first time Nebraska's had that this season. Dante Dowdell has scored 11 touchdowns on the ground. He gets it done. I think you've got the offensive line has gotten respect.
Playing well.
He said some positive things about the offensive line. So I think Nebraska has the elements necessary to put it together to play the same way, with the addition of you've got a quarterback that can do some things. If your defense is all set to just stop the run, there's a quarterback there that can get the job done. He can be protected. So I think Nebraska has the offense balance is in Nebraska's favor from the standpoint of there's enough diversity there to maybe get the job done, even though the conditions are not going to be great for throwing the ball. There's no question about that.
Yeah, as you talk
about,
I
think Nebraska. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, as you talk about those conditions, Mike, and sorry to step all over your toes right there, what game stands out in your mind? There's been plenty of bad Black Friday weather games. Is there one that stands out in your memory as being exceptionally bad, where it's just horrible weather? Because this is a first, based on my recollection, a night game on Black Friday where it's going to be cold as balls,
Yeah, that probably sticks out. So what sticks out to me is a long ago Husker baseball game at Iowa State. That's the worst situation I've ever been in. I think Ames, Iowa is even worse than Iowa City. There's like this little circle around Ames, Iowa, and it can be like 40 degrees. And then you go inside that circle, and it's like 2 below.
You're not wrong. They've got that damn open end zone in Ames. And, it's just brutal. Game Dog says 91 Oklahoma was awesome. I'm still thawing out from that, Game Dog. I think in 91 Oklahoma, I also think in 96 Colorado. And that didn't start as a night game, but it sure turned dark, that black ice game. I mean, that was cold, cold, cold.
Yes. It's but when you're sitting in the press box, it's less of a situation than if you're somebody sitting out in those stands.
No, I know. I'm going to have to get junior hand warmers and feet warmers.
Yeah. And just be prepared.
I'll be fine. Elijah and I will be a little warm.
I gotta figure out how much money I gotta pay Junior to go be one of those crazies that paints their chest and goes shirtless.
Oh, that kid doesn't like wearing a shirt because he spends 17 hours a day at the gym. He's walking around like which way to the beach. I mean, I guess I wouldn't wear a shirt either if I had his upper body. That being said,
if it's 10 degrees above, you wouldn't wear a shirt. I think you need to wear a shirt.
No, we're not going to make people,
especially in the presence of all these people. It's not just the temperature; it's the people.
We're talking about
the insulation.
The insulation's less than it's been, but it still isn't pleasant.
Well, did you guys see that guy on Thursday Night Football last week in the snow? That was probably he was over $3 and he was shirtless out in the crowd. He had plenty of insulation. He was having a good time.
The trick is apparently to just coat yourself in Vaseline.
No diddy.
No, I'm serious. That players would put Vaseline on their arms, right, Babbers?
Yeah, that's what they would do. The offensive linemen especially would put that Vaseline on, and that would help.
That's supposed to help with the wind, right? The wind with the cold?
Probably not being grabbed, being a little slick too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you still do that?
We need to ask Searles because he never wore sleeves.
I was going to say we got to ask a Big Ten referee, but they probably don't know.
No, who you play for? It depends who you play for. If you can get away with it or not.
Okay, you just got flagged there.
Yeah. Oh, you're Nebraska? Yeah. March it back 10.
Say something unnice about the refs. That's a 15-yard penalty.
That is, and a fine. It's happening. Mike, go to basketball real quick. Nebraska bouncing back in a big way with the statement over Creighton. Here come the Yotes tonight at PBA, 22.5. Wow. Tiger Shark driver says, Schmidt, you might attract an Iowa cheerleader without a shirt on. Run. Wow. 22.5. Back to basketball.
It's a rivalry. See, it's a rivalry. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think the biggest sticking point is you got beat a number of years in dramatic, heart-wrenching fashion by Iowa. But it's not like they send guys to the NFL. They send linebackers. They send linemen. They're a talented program. That being said, on paper, you were supposed to out-talent Iowa, but you never, ever, post-Bo, out-coached Iowa. And that's the thing that I think drives Nebraska fans nuts with how they lost and how you weren't able to handle business, and Iowa took advantage of your mistakes. How it went down time and time again with a drive, a score, or a walk-off kick, Mike. I mean, that's been part of the gasoline to this bonfire.
Frustration leads to a rivalry.
Yeah, for sure. Hoops. Do you think Nebraska cruises tonight, or do they struggle?
I think Nebraska cruises, but the point spread is a reflection, I think, to some degree of the opposition, obviously, but by the same token, I think it's the respect that Nebraska has earned at this point. Despite the one loss, I think Nebraska has shown that it's really a positive that Nebraska's got three big guys. Mm-hmm. You can be aggressive with those guys as they were against Creighton and Kalkbrenner, and you've got 15 fouls to deal with there. And Nebraska hasn't necessarily had that in the center in recent seasons, and this is a good thing, I think. So, I think Nebraska rolls tonight. I don't know. You can roll and not win by 22, but again, I think that shows some degree of the respect that Nebraska has earned, plus the opposition.
It's Mike Babcock. Be sure to catch his post-game column, Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Thoughts on Nebraska and Iowa at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, happy Thanksgiving to you and your fam. Thank you much for joining us today, bud.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your listeners, viewers, whatever.
Babbers, you take care, bud. Thank you much. All right, good to spend time with Mike Babcock. Open phones here till 5, 489-1240.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
and Elijah
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
on Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff with Mike Babcock. You're invited to check us out on the podcast. Search Hail Varsity Radio. And do that Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Take us with on your time. 489-1240. Open phones here till 5. Evan Bland, a little bit after 5 o'clock. Scott Dochterman with The Athletic in hour 2. And JB is my dad, employing us to get a Uber. Jay is asking bourbon or rye. I go rye. You have, when we talk about this Iowa-Nebraska showdown, Steven checks in, says, I hate that the game's going to be so cold, takes away from the game. I think it's fitting that this is kind of a black and blue slugfest, right? You want some aesthetics, sure. You want guys to be able to make plays, but you also, part of the beauty of football, the elements. CW says GBR. Check that in. Game Dog says, I love those Nebraska OU weather games, 76, 83, 88, 91, 93, 96. Absolutely. I like it better now, not being out in said elements because I am soft with my older age. So it's Game Dog also suggesting with some Grateful Dead, Hard to Handle, with the Pigpen on vocals, Terrapin Station. I never really got into Terrapin Station, Game Dog. I don't know that Working Man's Dead is kind of the, Casey Jones, not the super trendy stuff, but Ripple's probably my favorite. Bertha. So I'll take some notes here. So Steven says, make sure to hit that pit stop at Earl's in Des Moines. All right, we'll do that. Black Hills Bread and Inn says, Iowa, great place to stop if you have to take a bleep and want some breakfast pizza. That's funny. That is so good. Yeah, Brown Eyed Women. Good tune, Game Dog, for sure.
Can I say something that might be a little controversial?
What?
I do like Iowa City as a town.
It's
not a bad little town. It's got a bit of a Lincoln feel to it, honestly. It's a bit hillier. It's got the river running through. It's not Salt Creek, but it's not a bad little college town.
When we went in 2022, Iowa Russ, his neighbor, good dudes, and we had a good time. And I think the only place that was open when we got there Thursday night was a pretty well-known college bar that's kind of a chain of them. You might find it at 14th and O. Keep doing that math. Again, maybe Blackout Wednesday, but it's no free shout-out Wednesday.
What?
Used to be a record store across from a place that sells Elk Creek to the west, southwest corner.
That's a chain?
I think so.
Huh. Today I learned.
Some of you have sisters. Some of you have.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a chain.
When I say chain, I think it's
okay. It's like
in a lot of college towns.
Yeah.
So that's like the only place that was serving food.
I like how no free shout-outs, and you spelled it out completely where everyone in Lincoln will know what you're talking about.
Trying to do my best, but that's where we went in Iowa City. And found a little booth in back, and everyone else was getting away from the family, and it was all right. The only problem was it was 11 a.m. the next morning.
See, last time I was in Iowa City, I was traveling with the Husker baseball team for my work with Husker Division. They did. How'd you know? I think maybe I've told this story before, but before...
Educated guess.
No, it's actually after they left me. So there was a Saturday matinee and a Sunday matinee game after Iowa walked off Nebraska on Friday.
Was this with Will or Erstad?
Erstad. Oh, man. Erstad's team speech on that bus whenever we first got to Iowa City.
Tell me.
Just expletive-ridden.
But that's totally Erstad.
Oh, yeah. He was ready for it.
I mean, he's ready for war all the time. I love Erstad.
Yeah, because there are a couple different news organizations waiting outside the baseball or Haymarket Park as the team was on board the bus and they're interviewing Erstad.
Was he pacing with a bat?
No, he was fine. But then he gets to Iowa City, and that was like the theme of his speech was like, man, these reporters are asking me if this series means anything different because it's Iowa, and I have to be nice and tell them no, but F that, guys. This one means more. We hate Iowa. He really went in on the team.
How'd that work out?
They got walked off on Friday night, and then the bus left me at the stadium because there's fireworks going off, and they wanted to get the heck out of there. Anyway, I make it back to the team hotel, and I end up sneaking out and going off to a bar in Iowa City, and had a great time.
I'm sure you did.
To be fair, but had good memories in Iowa City from that one. Bad memories waking up the next morning and being like, it's a Saturday matinee game here, and I was up too late last night.
Sure, one of those. No, I mean, we had a good time. Then we had to sprint back overnight because it was, rule. That news was coming down the following Saturday. Mm-hmm. So did the weekend show, did the rule announcement live, Sports Center, or College Game Day, actually. And then here comes the presser. So quick turnaround time, but it was totally worth it. We'll be able to pace ourselves a little bit. Julie has been to the location we are talking about, but Julie has been to the one in Milwaukee.
See, I went to...
Julie, rate the one in Milwaukee. Because, I was kind of surprised there was food.
Wouldn't trust that.
It was wings.
Oh, okay. Well, I went to a bar in Iowa City that had like wrestling singlets hung up all over the wall.
Sure.
And I'm like,
Did you have to try one on?
No. That was just different, though, of like all these famous wrestlers. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize Iowa cared that much about wrestling. Like, we love Husker wrestling around here. We love Coach Manning. But it was different to be like, the theme of this bar, which was very popular, was just wrestling.
Iowa, I would say, puts wrestling right up there with football.
I'll say then they print All-Americans in that program as well.
Pretty good. So, it'll be on Friday, 3 to 5, the Hail Varsity Black Friday show. 65%, that's the number. That's the number when you look at run pass for Iowa football. 65% of the time they're going to run it, and then run it some more. You do the other side of the math. That's right. That's how selective they are with throwing the football. And that's, to me, going to be your ball game. What does Iowa do if they do indeed have to turn to the pass because their run game isn't working? I haven't decided yet what is good for the Nebraska defense. What I mean by that, what do they need for TFLs? It needs to be second and long or third and long, right? I mean, Caleb Johnson, he might be able to bust off a 5, 6, 7 yarder on first down, not consistently if you're a Nebraska fan, but he'll get his. But does he return to midseason or early season form where he's breaking long ones? Or is he kind of feeling the season like he has this month, where his longest run's been 16 yards? I guess to just spit it out, at this moment in time, I envision Nebraska needing a second half like Michigan State performance all game long against the run. Kenneth Walker didn't do a thing against Nebraska. Well, you can't have Caleb Johnson get loose either, clearly. We'll wind down hour one.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So some numbers from our dear friend Game Dog in the stream. Nebraska defense against UCLA and SC, 7.4, 6 and change against SC. So that number is 6.6 against SC. So if Iowa's at 6 per play, good night, Irene. Reminder to get buckled up, hands on the wheel, eyes and focus straight ahead. The job of the driver is to just drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Get to some emails here in a little bit. Chris at hailvarsity.com. Nebraska had a decommit to Bear Tierney. I have not, Tiger Shark driver.
Moving on.
Moving on. Yes, moving on.
We have not.
But do you have any questions for Evan Bland? Tasteful and football related, preferably in the stream. Hail Varsity YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe. But we may have to do a little research. Places open Thanksgiving night if we don't want to go to that one spot.
Research.
You know what? You're over research now?
No, why just bring along a bottle of wild turkey and let's have a party in the hotel room.
Okay. Maybe.
Well, why do we need to find a spot?
I don't know.
Man.
We don't have to get up at 7 a.m. on Friday?
That's what I'm saying. That's why we should do it in the hotel room.
Just stay where you're at.
We'll flip on. There's got to be something on TV on a Thursday night, right? There's going to be NFL will be on that night probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Green Bay and Miami, sound right?
Yeah, my roommates are actually going to that game. They're currently en route to Wisconsin.
Really? I would have. Brent says, Elijah, there's free ice at the Marriott.
That's what I'm saying. Free ice. You bring along your wild turkey left over from Thanksgiving dinner. It'll work, and then we'll
maybe on our way out. Hopefully, we can stop by the Templeton spot.
Ooh, you want to do a factory tour?
I don't know that would get us to Iowa City.
Well, I guess you got Thanksgiving stuff on Saturday, don't you?
Uh-huh.
You can just drop me off at the Templeton factory.
You'll find your way home. Yeah. You'll phone your boy Erstad after he's done swearing. Hey, remember that time you left me? Yeah, I need a make good. Yeah. Can you come get me, Coach? So Jeff chimes in, says, I've been to that bar you speak of in South Bend. Kind of sketchy. You wouldn't want to wear a hat any direction except forward. Due to what it represents to certain troublemaking affiliates.
Does this get back to Colin Cowherd calling Baker Mayfield a backwards hat kind of guy?
I think it might be more of a gang-related shot or shout out by Jeff there. So, yeah, there's that. No, the bar I went to with Kranak, you got to ask him about this. When we went to Notre Dame a billion years ago, that's almost 25 years ago. My God, was linebackers. That was the place.
You rode the short bus there.
We did. Yeah. Monty, this little guy, had a short bus that was painted navy blue with gold Irish decals on it. Dropped this off at linebackers and celebrated an overtime win by Eric Crouch, Mr. Heisman.
Not too bad.
No, it was good. It was all right. Didn't pay a dime for beer that night. And we didn't walk either. It was handled. All right, Evan Bland coming up. Hour 2, it's with you. It's Hail Varsity. Happy Thanksgiving Eve.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Well, Instagram has gone full Thanksgiving Big Ten. And at Big Ten Media Days, they're asking the coaches, who would you not trust to cook Thanksgiving dinner?
Lincoln Riley.
Well, that was James Franklin's answer. He's like, Lincoln's too skinny. He doesn't know how to cook.
We all saw his brisket.
It was not good. A lot of them, the biggest guy with the Big Ten coaching fraternities, the pig farmer, Coach Bielema, and he was nominated a couple of times. Guys wouldn't trust to eat at his dinner table somehow.
To eat or to cook?
Well, to eat whatever he prepared.
I understand not trusting to eat at the dinner table. I get that.
That's mine, boy. So, yeah.
You just look at Bielema, though.
But
you know
Fleck led the way with folks saying, I don't know that PJ can throw down.
You know that Bielema is just a menace to society and behind the grill in a good way.
Yeah.
There's no way that guy can't grill up and mean anything.
That guy knows how to cook. big time. Evan Bland with us, Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan, would there be a hard pass for you if Evan Bland and his wonderful family invited to eat at a Big Ten coach's dinner table for Thanksgiving? Would you politely decline some of those overtures?
Well, I mean, they all have the money to put out a pretty big spread.
Or order it, right?
or order it, yeah. And the Fleck thing surprises me because he's going to explain it, but he's a guy who, like, I think would have done the research, and he's just going to talk you through the process. So, like, if you don't want to listen to it, I can see how maybe you would shy away from that. But I think PJ Fleck would actually be pretty entertaining. He would explain it in a way that then you could go do it and show it to your family or subsequent dinners. So I think the Fleck hate to me is somewhat puzzling. Curt Cignetti would be an interesting one. Like, how are you doing that? He'd say, Google it. And I'd say, okay. So there's not a ton of great conversation there.
Curt Cignetti is absolutely the crazy uncle that you remember from childhood Thanksgivings.
Want a beer?
Like, Uncle Kurt's here?
Sig, I'm 9. Well, go
he
get
likes
me
his
one.
steaks well done. He likes his steaks well done, I guess.
I pray no. I pray that's not a thing with anybody. Evan, what is happening tomorrow? Are you getting a little grub with the fam before you head to Iowa City? Are you going Friday morning?
The years when Nebraska plays at Iowa actually works out really well for me because I have family in Des Moines. So I'll be in Thanksgiving in Des Moines all day Thursday, and then I join up with the rest of the World Herald crew, and we'll hit Iowa City on Friday. So it actually, I can kind of cut the trip down a little bit and see some family that sometimes it's harder to see, and do it in the name of football and all the rest. So it actually tends to work out.
Good for you, man. That is good.
Yeah.
Does it work out Friday with Nebraska? And I ask this because it seems that no matter how limited Iowa has been on offense, they've put up enough points. Now, that wasn't the case 2 years ago. Nebraska had Trey Palmer. Nebraska had a mismatch. But quarterback situation was brutal a year ago for Iowa. They found a way. 3 years ago, they scored 16 in the fourth quarter, right? And right now, they're Eric Stratton, damn glad to meet you. Actually, it's Jackson, but he's the guy that's taking snaps and handing off to Caleb Johnson. Are you concerned that despite Iowa being what seems to be decimated at quarterback, it's still going to be a tough day for Nebraska defensively?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing about Iowa is even when they are limited or seemingly limited in some of these ways, they make up for it in other ways. So, like, turnover margin, for example, they're number one in the Big Ten. Or you look at what they do on special teams, and they have a good kicker, they have a good punter, they have a top 20 return game with punts and kickoffs. So, like, they can find ways to do it that way. Of course, their one-dimensional nature of their offense is still awfully good with Caleb Johnson and what he's able to do. And so it's interesting, right? Because, like, the way I kind of looked at this game was, do you feel more confident that Nebraska's defense is going to tackle well and limit that run game, or do you feel more confident that the offense under Dana Holgorsen and with what we just saw last week, does that carry over on a cold night in Kinnick against a better defense than what Wisconsin is? And I kind of found myself saying, I actually feel like the offense is going to continue to go along. And what that seemed really unlikely a month ago with the struggles that had, and as much as the black shirts have been sort of the anchor of this thing. And so I think there are different ways that Nebraska could win this game. One of them is you got to tackle really well if you're talking about Nebraska defensively, because Iowa's just not going to slows Stratton through the air. They didn't last week. They threw 14 passes, passed for under 80 yards, but they have a dynamic back. They have an offensive line. They have an NFL-level method to their run game with the outside zone stuff. And so if you're Nebraska, man, your insides need to do what they've done. I think you feel pretty good about Ty Robinson and Nash Huntmaker doing their thing. And so then it becomes, you need a steady day from the outside guys. You need Jamari Butler and MJ Sherman and Prince Waluman-Mielin and those guys, as well as the linebackers, just to be really steady. Like, you got to be in your gaps. You can't be playing a lot of hero ball, and just try to limit those runs as best as you can, knowing, again, if it comes into a third and medium or third and long, Iowa's not comfortable in those situations. So to me, it's not about kind of the high-end big plays. It's about preventing the big plays on the other side, and we'll see if they're up to it.
So it's the classic Big Ten West keys, Evan. The Big Ten West might be dead, but the keys live on forever, especially when you're playing Iowa. Win time of possession, outrush your opponent, don't turn the football over, at least be a wash on special teams. I think Nebraska can win this football game. Oh, field position. How could I forget?
Totally. Yeah, it is. It's an old school. And I would add, there's added weight on winning the first and or second quarter, because you don't want to be playing from behind the way that Iowa plays these games. They're going to run the heck out of the ball. It's going to shorten the game. You're going to have limited possessions in this thing. Now, if you have the lead, say you're up 10 points in the second half, suddenly Iowa's going to have to kind of come out of its comfort zone a little bit and be a little bit more two-dimensional in terms of the pass game and involving other guys. But if you throw an early interception or you just fall behind early, man, it's really hard to up just from the way that they play. And so I don't expect this to be a shootout. I don't think that's Las Vegas doesn't expect this to be a shootout. You'll have the conditions and every. So, yeah, you can take, the Big Ten West out of the teams, but I guess you can't take the out of the Big Ten West, or maybe you can flip that around. But it's a throw game if you want to talk about, just the style of play that's kind of defined Nebraska and that collection of teams over the last 8 years or so.
Everyone remembers, Evan, those gentlemen that were in the stands last year at the Nebraska game cheering for the punts. They made their way onto national television. I believe they also made the rounds on Twitter as well, probably Facebook too. Is this a punt fest on Friday?
I don't know. I don't think it's to the extent of last year. Last year, you think about just the nature of, you remember those offenses last year, and Iowa's out there with, Deacon Hill and reserve field goal kickers and all the rest, and Nebraska's was dead at that spot as well. So I think this will be a little better. Iowa's offense is better, and there's really only one way to go. But, Caleb Johnson is a dynamic back. I think he's right up there with Woody Marks of USC. I think those would be kind of my 1-2 if you talk about backs in the Big Ten. And then, again, Nebraska, a year ago, was just putting duct tape on everything at this point. You're just trying to get to the finish line. And right now it feels like there's actual momentum, and you're just kind of like, hey, what are they going to do with another week of Dana Holgorsen kind of knowing the personnel and being able to get comfortable and study up? It feels like there's maybe another level that they can hit, as crazy as that sounds, after you put up 44 against Wisconsin. So, how does Emmett Johnson come back for an encore, or how do you mix in some of your tight ends, your receivers in different ways than even we've seen before? So, I think you're going to see a handful of punts, because that's just what it is. But to me, the high water or the low water mark, or whatever you want to call it, was certainly last year with the way those teams limped to the finish line.
Evan Bland with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald, omaha.com, where you read his Big Red coverage at Evan Bland, OWH. Follow him on Twitter. So, Evan, what do you feel good about with Nebraska's offense against this Iowa defense? You're right. They seem to be gaining momentum, which is wonderful. You've got a dude in Holgorsen to put a game plan together and have a feel for the play call. Turnovers aside, got to take care of the football. But what do you think Nebraska can attack or may go after with this Iowa defense?
Well, I think it's going to have to be probably in the pass game where it really breaks through. They've allowed 2 rushing touchdowns this season. 2. That's 3 better than anyone else. at the FBS level. So you'll still see Emmett Johnson involved, and I think he'll move the ball some, but it's a big ask to, I think, rely on the run game this late in the year against a defense like that. I mean, their linebackers clean up. Their front line is really solid, really disciplined. On the back end, they're more limited. One of their best corners is going to be out, Jamari Harris. We saw 2 years ago that was a defense that could be exposed if you had a high-end burner, the way that Nebraska did with Trey Palmer at that time. I don't know that guy is on this team now. Maybe it's Jalen Lloyd. Maybe he could have a game like that. Maybe it's Isaiah Nayor potentially. But it does feel like this is a game where you're going to have to run to set up the pass, and it does seem like maybe they could be vulnerable over the top, maybe potentially in the screen game as well. If you get I was blitzing and suddenly, Nebraska's been able to execute some of these screen plays where the linemen pull or even the other wideouts are blocking on the perimeter. So I think you're going to have to be multiple in that way. And, Nebraska this year has not been a home run hitting offense in terms of breaking one for 70 or 80. So I think you're probably going to have to convert on third downs. You're going to have to mix it up, be unpredictable with your play calls. So maybe this is a game when you talk about the Dana Holgorsen effect, where the plays that you call in a given situation in a given moment have a little bit more impact even than they did the last couple of weeks. So I think it's going to be a real chess match back and forth. I was really sound fundamentally, and so you might have to scheme it up a little bit, but I do think it's going to be one where you're probably going to have to put together some longer drives to score on those guys and count a little bit less on maybe the big.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, if we take the weekend slate of college football games, and there's some good ones this weekend, and let's say that all the games this weekend are your Thanksgiving spread, what's sitting out on the dinner table tomorrow afternoon. If that's the case, what dish is Nebraska and Iowa?
Maybe the corn casserole.
It's solid.
It's appropriate for the teams. It's I guess sort of that draws in the casual viewer necessarily. The window will help, it not being on Saturday. But I think it's one that if you're looking at the lineup of games or if you're looking at that particular side dish, you've already had your mashed potatoes, your meat, your whatever else, and you're like, oh yeah, the corn casserole, like that could be good, and maybe it is, or maybe it's overcooked, and you just kind of take a few bites, and you're like, okay, that's probably enough of that. So that's my on the fly analogy of Nebraska-Iowa.
Evan, I want to get your thought with Dana Holgorsen. What's your read? What's your feel with his long-term availability at Nebraska? I mean, he's saying here and now that's his focus, but as far as how coveted he is in the college football world, totally respected, but with this coaching cycle right now, what do you think? I mean, do you feel or lean that he's probably back in 2025? I mean, I'm asking you to speak for him, and I don't mean that formally, but, what's your lean right now?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to speculate, I would say that my guess is he would be back next year based on what he said to this point. I think there's something to the idea that, like, you can be a coach, as he's been for 13 years. You've been the face of so many programs. You've, in recent years, had to adjust to the portal and to NIL. And so when he says that Saturday was one of the most fun times that he's had because he can just call plays and kind of go back to the thing that got him involved in football in the first place, I think that can resonate a little bit. And it's not to say that he wouldn't ever want to be a head coach again. That he's up for pushing himself and trying out different things and learning other ways to be successful. So I don't that he's necessarily 50s, so it's not like this is maybe his last stop or anything. But I think even with the success he's had the last few weeks, you can afford to be a little picky and choosy and say, hey, I'll look out and maybe an opportunity will come along. But if it doesn't, you got a great thing at Nebraska with a young quarterback, with a skill set of guys offensively that are strong. I mean, he was very complimentary of guys like Ja'Cory Barney, who was still just a freshman. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance that he comes back, that he can kind of, operate under the culture that Matt Rule has already set, make an impact, and then, again, if things go well, you can have another shot, maybe being a head coach. So that's my hunch at this point. We'll see what he wants to do, what other opportunities come along. But, especially if this thing finishes well and they show out well against Iowa and potentially in a bowl game, I think there'd be a lot of positive momentum for him coming back.
Evan, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for the time and insight, man.
Appreciate you guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Scott Dochterman with us to talk some college football, look at Nebraska-Iowa, the national landscape with another round, Scott, of the playoff positioning. How you doing? You gearing up for Thanksgiving? Thanks for the time.
Yeah, doing great. Looking forward to the holiday, and then also a couple of games this weekend that have some real importance.
Big-time games that have monster importance. And I want to kind of get your feel here between the Big Ten and the SEC, Scott, just with how the Big Ten's performed and the reality that the Big Ten, they've got a couple of top-heavy teams. As good as the SEC is, it doesn't feel like there's a dominant team. Not that there's not some really good teams, or you can't make that argument for Georgia. But in this race for 4 or more, how do you see it right now with the Big Ten versus the SEC for, conference superiority when it comes to playoff placement?
It's an interesting dynamic because the leagues obviously are tied together, will be tied together from here on out. But the Big Ten, as you mentioned, is really top-heavy. There are 4 teams that are in great playoff positioning, and they've played that way all year. And then there just seems to be a drop-off of a tier, and that's in wins and losses and just kind of perception and reality, where after, Penn State and Indiana, it just kind of there's a dip. Illinois at 8-3, Iowa at 7-4, and some other teams. There just isn't those teams that are in that teen range that could be considered competitors. So the depth of the league at the Big Ten level seems a little sparse this year. Whereas when you look at the SEC, and maybe in contrast to years past where they have had, just supreme heavyweights, and whether that's Alabama or Georgia or, usually those two, and then maybe another team sprinkled in there here and there, that they just are really logged at the top, and there's a bunch of really good teams that any given Saturday or Friday night or whatever going forward has a chance to win a national title, but they also have fatal flaws that could keep them out of even the playoff or losing in the first round game. So it makes it for a really interesting situation. As of today, we would see 4 Big Ten teams and 3 SEC teams. And barring some sort of a major loss, probably in the ACC or even the Big Ten, it's probably going to wind out that way. But then you could also see an SEC team sneak in there. I find this really fascinating. Now in the new 12-team playoff era, how this is going to work this year and then beyond when they really start to form a new future beginning in 2026.
Scott, do you see potentially teams getting punished for title game appearances? Like, say it's Oregon, Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Ohio State loses again. Do you see them getting punished in the college football playoff rankings at the end of the season if that were to happen? How is that going to work out? Because that's an interesting dynamic I've kind of been following, where it's, well, do you want to make the conference title game because you get a chance at a first round bye, but you also get a chance for another game to maybe knock you down a peg?
I think it's going to be case by case, but I think it can hurt you. I mean, I don't know so much that Oregon, Ohio State, if it's 12-0 versus 11-1, it's going to hurt either team, because I think both teams are probably comfortably in 1 and 5 at that point. The winner is going to be the number 1 overall seed. The loser is going to be the number 5 seed, and have a first-round home playoff game. And the 5 seed maybe as advantageous as any seed on the board because you're going to play the weakest team entering the tournament, and then you're going to play the weakest, or weakest champion receiving a first-round bye in the second round. So I don't see that hurting the Big Ten necessarily. Now, for other schools and other leagues, I can see that being an adverse effect. Let's take the SEC, for instance. If Texas A&M somehow upsets Texas, it's still going to be a 9-3 team, and if Georgia beats it, I don't know that Texas A&M will get into the playoff. I don't even know if it should at 9-4 and the season that it's had. So it would be, unfortunate for them. And then likewise the ACC. I mean, what happens if, you have a 1-loss Miami versus a 1-loss SMU, and one of the teams gets blown out? You might see the committee decide to push it out completely out of the playoff picture altogether. So I think it's going to be case by case. But and I think that's going to create some conversations in the future as to how many teams do you want in this tournament? Do you want to make it a 16-team tournament? Well, in that case, maybe it's time to eliminate conference championship games because Lord knows that in some of these leagues, the tiebreakers are very, very difficult to decipher.
The tiebreakers, right? Make your head hurt. Scott Dochterman's with us.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go.
Yep, Scott Dochterman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, at Scott Dochterman on Twitter. A lot of games this weekend, Scott. Want to get your thought on Nebraska-Iowa. I know you're familiar with the Hawkeyes, and Nebraska trying to kind of right the ship with Dana Holgorsen. He's been fascinating to watch since he arrived. Nebraska's offense showing some life, but overall, I know it's not a national stage game. It has a national spotlight. What do you think of what Nebraska's walking into? Your take on this Iowa team?
This is going to be a fascinating matchup, and I think, if the eyes of the nation are upon it, I think can really show some just fascinating storylines. I mean, first of all, congrats to Nebraska for becoming bowl eligible. I think it's better for the sport. It's better for the Big Ten when Nebraska can get to the postseason, and I'm sure that the fans will respond with whatever trip they get. But I think that to me, it starts with the juxtaposition at quarterback, where you have in Nebraska, you have a 5-star true freshman, Dylan Raiola, who's had a nice freshman year. He's grown a lot, and I think he'll be much better for the experiences he's had. You have him on one side, and then on Iowa side, you have a 5th-string walk-on quarterback who came to camp, met Kirk Ferentz in August, and Jackson Stratton, who's going to be starting this game opposite him. So you have that wide variance in starting quarterbacks. But you have two teams that I think, here in year 14 of their series on Black Friday it's really grown into a rivalry. I mean, at first it felt forced. Now it feels more organic. And they really hit the head on a lot of these different categories that I think it could be a really fascinating breakdown of this game. And I mean, I guess starting with Nebraska, I've seen a little bit different vibe out of the offense. The tendencies aren't there as prevalent. I think the schemes are a little bit sharper with Dana Holgorsen, who, strangely enough, he grew up about 25 miles away from me, and he was in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. I was in Burlington, Iowa. So it's kind of fun for me there. But and you see a team that is still trying to gain some consistency. I think last week played one of its better games against Wisconsin, and it's played well at times. And then I think you look at Iowa, and they've been a little bit of a question mark because they've scored 5 out of their 6 home games, they've scored at least 38 points, which may come as a surprise to everybody watching Iowa over the last few years. But then they've gone on the road, and save for the win against Maryland, I mean, it's been pretty pedestrian. And, their defense is good, but not quite as good as it was last year. But its running game is outstanding and led by Caleb Johnson, who will probably be a unanimous first-team All-American.
Scott Dochterman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. With Jackson Stratton, what's the ask of Iowa, and what do you think he can do against Nebraska's defense?
This is going to be a real important part of this game, and I think first and foremost, it's going to be a game manager. Don't do anything stupid. Don't throw into double coverage. Be a true game manager, I think, and that maybe that's not going to be exactly what everybody wants to see, but he does have a very strong arm. I will give him that, and it's going to be very cold. So I think in some ways he's going to have to figure out how to take some RPMs off his fastball. Because receivers are going to drop it if it's 9 degrees, and he's throwing 65 miles an hour, it's going to be kind of rough. But, last week he did exactly what he needed to do, which was engineer victory. He was 10 of 14. He had, 77 yards, didn't make any mistakes, got all the trains running on time. And I think that's kind of going to be the ask here. In some ways, I think with Iowa, while they have made major strides on offense, the passing game still is lagging behind. And they've got a bell cow in the backfield that they feel like they can rely on, even if they get shut down in 3 or 4 series. Then that one moment, boom, he breaks out, and I think that's probably what they're banking on, and they're not going to be shy about playing what we termed like Ferentz ball, which is, or which Marty Schottenheimer perfected, decades ago, which is just, hey, there's no sin in punting. We'll live to fight another down, and we'll keep going, and we've got a good running back, and we'll keep fighting. So I think that's going to be the charge for Jackson Stratton.
Scott, last thought here. Schmidt and I will be out in Iowa City on Friday. We've experienced Kinnick in November. We've never experienced Kinnick at night. What do you think that atmosphere is going to be like? What should we expect?
I think this will be a much better atmosphere than what has really become accustomed to this series. A lot of times having it be in day games, the day after Thanksgiving, I think everybody's kind of hung over on turkey and mashed potatoes, and there hasn't been that real fiery atmosphere that normally we see at Kinnick Stadium during the course of say an early November game or something like that. I think that will change on Friday night, where everybody gets to digest and work off their all the carbs from Thursday, and so I would expect a much livelier, louder, more intense atmosphere. They're calling it a blackout. The team's going to wear all black uniforms. Having all day to tailgate versus just a couple of hours, I think will change the dynamic of how the game is, the impact that the crowd will have on it, which will be more like a normal game and less like a kind of your typical Black Friday game.
Scott Dochterman with the Athletic National College Football Man, insight on Nebraska-Iowa. Any upset weariness this weekend, Scott, before we say goodbye, of the slate of games this weekend? Anybody on upset alert?
Yeah, that's really a good question. I mean, I guess I don't know how much would be an upset, but Farmageddon and Ames, I think, has a chance to go to Kansas State. I think this is going to be a real coin flip game. That's turned out to be a really good organic rivalry. I think that has a chance. Anything in the Big 12, though, is hard to really predict at this point. But USC has been really good at home. Its only loss has come to Penn State in overtime, and it had a 2-touchdown lead. If it plays Notre Dame with that kind of ability, I mean, I think that could be a very competitive matchup, and Notre Dame hasn't had one for a few months. So I think that could be one that you might want to put the Irish on upset alert.
Well, SC's got the horses for sure. If they get locked in, they could make it a long Saturday for the Irish. Scott, have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks for a couple of minutes today.
Yeah, thank you, and have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on Friday.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic, Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Dr. Brandon, it sounds like you've got the smoker ready for Turkey Day.
Absolutely, buddy. It's going to be a great morning for smoking tomorrow. It's going to be good.
A guy that is trying to kind of heat up is Isiah Pacheco, running back for the Chiefs, the pride of Rutgers. Really whacked his ankle, something fierce, week 2 against Cincinnati. Fractured fibula. He's back. He's cleared. What should Chiefs Kingdom expect? Let's talk about Pacheco.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of a nice surprise that he's coming back. as we rewind back to September when this happened, so essentially he had we call it an ankle fracture or fibula fracture. So as we've talked before on the show, anatomically, thinking about the ankle, there's if you kind of feel on the outside of your ankle, there's that ball portion out there. We call that the distal fibula, or the end of the fibula. And essentially he broke kind of in that region. We're not specifically sure exactly where this was, but somewhere in that zone is typically where we see fractures in this area. They did not mention anything about having to fix the syndesmosis. That's that big ligament we've talked about as we kind of get into like a high ankle sprain scenario. They did not talk about having to fix that, but that potentially is a possibility here. Although with his fast recovery, I don't think that's probably a possibility. At any rate, it broke his fibula. They had to fix it surgically, and he started rehabbing hard. And really, he's pretty aggressive in his return to play protocol. Pretty amazing to be back at, essentially 2 months here, maybe not even quite 2 months, and they're talking about a comeback, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, Dr. Brandon, what we're sitting at is 2 months and 2 weeks. It was on September 15th against the Bengals whenever he fractured that ankle. With that in mind, what do you think was done surgically to repair this? Because we know he went under the knife. When I hear that timetable, I don't necessarily think hardware in the ankle, but maybe I'm wrong there. What do you think was done surgically to help out Pacheco and give him this timetable?
Yeah, it's either a combination of one, if it was just your basic ankle fibula fracture, you're talking plate and screws typically for that. You can also fix those with what we call an intramedullary nail. That's an implant that goes up inside the bone, but not an amazing option for athletes. I know there's a gentleman in Florida that does that, but probably not the best option. So he probably had plate and screws. And then either in combination with that, if they had to fix that syndesmosis ligament, there would be those kind of sutures that go in between the two bones. Or if they talked about the fibula was fractured, so in some form they had to have some kind of plate and screw. If they didn't, and it was just kind of the sutures or stitches going across between the two bones, that's a possibility. But more than likely, this is a plate and screws at a minimum. And then following that, obviously, there's a period of some non-weight bearing, followed by just a really aggressive rehab course, that's what he's been up to.
With the plate and screws, Dr. Brandon, I assume those remain in. Those don't get removed. How does that change maybe how Pacheco can play the game if that remains in?
Yeah, ultimately the vast majority of patients who have hardware put in, plates and screws, will stay in forever. Occasionally you'll have some athletes or patients in general that complain of pain or tenderness over the area. In particular, if you're putting plates and screws in an area that doesn't have a lot of muscle, skin coverage over the top, those can be kind of annoying, painful, and then those patients typically would want those taken out. But from a return to play perspective, plate and screws should not be limiting for him. In fact, in some ways, they're somewhat protective. If you are trying to make an early return, that's still acting as an internal splint along that bone that's still probably healing at this point. Also a protector in terms of if somebody hits you there, again, same fashion, kind of an internal splint protecting that bone. So shouldn't really impact him, at least in the short term.
Let's talk workload. He is playing the Raiders on Black Friday. His brief history against the Raiders, really good. I mean, he goes for a lot of yards and a lot of carries. Can his workload be just like week 2 pre-injury?
Yeah, he'll probably be on a limited carry timetable would be my thoughts. I'm thinking maybe that first week or two it might be more of a limited carry option, but we'll see. If he is looking amazing doing his drills in practice, if he's looking like he has great confidence and control and cutting abilities, then they might just throw him out there and say, hey, go to work.
Well, golf cart or NFL game, I mean, ankle fractures can happen.
I love the self-awareness.
You're never going to live that one down, buddy.
No, I just thought I'd beat both of you to it. The question I have, though, is the bitter cold. Does the cold irritate, potentially, that region?
Yeah, any type of kind of pressure change, temperature change potentially could irritate just a surgical area. Just you've disturbed the tissues there. There's scar tissue there, and patients do tend to complain of that. Hard to put true science behind that, but anecdotally, I have patients talk about that a lot. So no doubt that probably plays a role for sure. I think that what's really fascinating about these is I take care of a ton of these and these kind of athletes, and you see these folks, and they'll have these big injuries like this, and you say, hey, this bone's going to heal pretty fast. We've got a really strong construct in here. We're going to rehab you hard. But there's just still so many factors to try to get over and get back that early. I mean, you shut them down. They lose some motion. They're stiff. You lose a lot of that muscle mass, and you're not using it every day athletically. And to see somebody get back this fast is pretty remarkable to do that, and obviously to compete at that level. Again, these folks typically look really good, at least from a healing perspective at 6 weeks, but from a physiologic return to athletics perspective, it's just a different story. It just takes a lot longer typically than you want to get their muscle back. So for him to do this, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, one of the things, Dr. Brand, that I remember from whenever I broke my ankle was kind of that flexibility portion in the ankle where you're sitting in the cast for a month, and I didn't have any hardware put in, but you're sitting in the cast for a month and then in the walking boot, and then once you're out of all that, it's like, okay, my flexibility in my ankle is not what it used to be, and I feel like that's important for the running back position. Would you have any concerns in that regard for a running back coming back from this kind of injury?
Yeah, in the end, it'll come back, and it'll be close, to where it was before, especially with obviously all the high-level, therapy he's getting, and obviously the early range of motion program that he likely had that was, a little bit more aggressive, dialed up than a typical patient. But I do worry about some of that kind of proprioceptive ability. We've talked about this before, where just kind of that brain knows where that ankle is or joint is in space and able to cut when you want, and that kind of responsiveness to how it feels when you hit the turf and make certain cuts. And so that is different. And so how do you, regain that proprioceptive control? We call it neuromuscular control. Trying to regain that and that coordination will be challenging, especially here this first year. I do think as a high-level athlete like him, that will come back in time. It may not be quite the same as it was, but I still think this is a super recoverable injury, and I think his prognosis for return and success is high.
So good enough, Dr. Brandon, that I can comfortably slot Pacheco back into my starting lineup in fantasy?
Look at you.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would lean on the positive side there. I think so. I think it's going to be good.
Well, there's always Kareem Hunt to take carries and touches away from Elijah's point total.
Well, that's the concern, but I bought Pacheco low after the injury, didn't give up all that much capital for him. I think I can throw him back into the lineup. I need him. I'm on a 7-game slide.
Doesn't matter. just tap out and get the tattoo ready. All right.
You might want to see if maybe you get some draft concessions for next year out of that one.
Yeah. For at least some cash considerations.
Yeah. The old to be named later, right? Player to be named later. Dr. Brandon, have yourself a great Thanksgiving. Best to you and your family. Thank you much.
Thanks, fellas. Hope you guys have some great Turkey Day time. Take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, your Thanksgiving Eve. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. Give that a follow at HVarsity Radio. Find Elijah on Twitter at Herbalessence and Schmidt_radio for me. James checking in and says KJ is a beast. Totally agree with that. We always hold a premier running back under their average. This guy is Marcus Dupree reincarnated, the best that never was. That was a great 30 for 30.
I'm not sure that's the best comparison, but I see where he's coming from.
Just size, speed, explosiveness. Dupree was giant.
Yeah, Dupree was giant.
He was Herschel giant.
I'm not sure Johnson's that giant.
Who is Caleb's comp? I don't have one. But, listen, Monangai, Nebraska bottled him up. Kenneth Walker, years ago, Nebraska bottled him up.
Do you go, he's bigger than Blake Corum, but he's got that kind of contact balance and vision and patience.
Yeah. The thing that,
I don't know.
I look at Woody Marks, just the type of back he was, kind of a slider back, but was just explosive and was so shifty. But James suggesting that maybe Nebraska will have to outscore him. And I just wonder with, the unders being at 38.5, 39, 39.5, kind of in that range, below 40, right? Where it screams 24-17 with Iowa having a 5-point favorite. Can Nebraska, and we'll get more into this Friday. Again, come find us if you're on your way to Iowa City. We're at the Marriott across from Kinnick, top floor, as we'll be doing the Black Friday edition of Hail Varsity, 3 to 5, getting you ready for kickoff. If you're back in the friendly confines with the fireplace going, God love you. But we'll be streaming Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter, KFOR, Facebook, Twitter, all those platforms, Chiefs football and postgame. Keep us from being on the air on KFOR for the pregame. But postgame Real Red Reaction will be live at Kinnick, across from Kinnick for Real Red Reaction around 6 or 6:30, whenever. Check that. 9 or 9:30, forgive me, when the game ends. So we'll have you covered from Iowa City. And then the weekend edition of Hail Varsity, also from Iowa City at 7:45-ish.
And I think we have a good comp in here for Caleb Johnson from Game Dog. He's gone with the DeMarco Murray poll.
Nice work.
That's a good comp.
The pride of Las Vegas.
Yeah, good vision.
DeMarco was nice.
Good vision, good contact balance. This combination of size and speed. Or is he the biggest, most bruising back you'll ever run into?
Does he remind you of Mixon at all?
Mixon's not a bad pull either.
Yeah?
Mixon's
another Oklahoma running back. So, no, I mean, Nebraska's going to have to tackle and give me 3 white jerseys around Iowa's back at all times, because the first guy may miss the tackle. Nebraska's linebackers and safeties, man, going to be huge.
The one thing you do ask the question about is how worn down is Caleb Johnson after a long season. I mean, he's averaging over 20 carries per game. Hasn't quite had that explosive element to his game in November. I don't think he has any 20-plus yard rushes in the month of November yet. Could have just put the nail in the coffin for the Huskers by throwing that out there. But you do wonder, how worn down is he? How many touches can he realistically take in an offense where you don't really have much of a passing threat?
Do we throwing him on screens too? I mean, that's frustrating, possibly. Tuck's asking, we just kind of laid out the show program setup. Are we going to get Clausburn in the stream? Do we keep him in imaginary and wearing red?
I don't know. We have to keep him anonymous. I don't know.
Happy Thanksgiving. Talk to you at 3 Black Friday.